Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Dhena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye. We're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 3, Text number 17. Ayur harati vaipungsam
Ayur harati vaipungsam
Udyan astam chayan asau
Namastam Jayanasau
Tasyarte yatshano nita
Tasyarte Yachano Nita
Uttama shloka vartaya.
Shlokavartaya
Ayur harati vaipungsam
Ayur harati vaipungsam
Udyan astam chayan asau
Namastam Jayanasau
Tasyarte yatshano nita
Tasyarte Yachano Nita
Uttama shloka vartaya.
Shlokavartaya
Ayu,
Ayur
duration of life.
Duration of life
Harati, decreases.
decreases
Vai, certainly.
certainly
Pungsam, of the people.
of the people
Udyan, rising.
rising
Ashtam, setting.
setting
Cha,
Cha
also. Yan, moving. Asau, the sun. Tasya, of one who glorifies the Lord.
one who glorifies the Lord
Rete, except. Yat,
Yat
by whom.
by whom
Shana,
Shana
time.
time
Nita,
Nita
utilized.
Utilized
Uttama shloka,
Shloka
the all-good personality of Godhead.
the all personality of God
Vartaya,
Vartaya
in the topics of.
the topics of
Translation, both by rising and by setting, the sun decreases the duration of life of everyone, except one who utilizes the time by discussing topics of the all-good personality of Godhead. Please repeat. Both by rising and by setting,
both by rising and by setting
the sun decreases the duration of life
the sun decreases the duration of life
of everyone, except one who utilizes the time
except one who utilizes the time
by discussing the topics
by discussing topics
of the all-good personality of Godhead.
of the all good personality of God.
Purport. This verse indirectly confirms the greater importance of utilizing the human form of life to realize our lost relationship with the Supreme Lord by acceleration of devotional service. Time and tide wait for no man, so the time indicated by the sunrise and the sunset will be uselessly wasted if such time is not properly utilized for realizing identification of spiritual values. Even a fraction of the duration of life wasted, cannot be compensated by any amount of gold. Human life is simply awarded to a living entity, jiva, so that he can realize his spiritual identity and his permanent source of happiness. A living being, especially the human being, is seeking happiness because happiness is the natural situation of the living entity. But he is vainly seeking happiness in the material atmosphere. A living being is constitutionally a spiritual spark of the complete whole, and his happiness can be perfectly perceived in spiritual activities. The Lord is the complete spirit whole, and his name, form, quality, pastimes, entourage, and personality are all identical with him. Once a person comes in contact with any one of the above-mentioned energies of the Lord through the proper channel of devotional service, the door to perfection is immediately opened. In the Bhagavad Gita 2.40, the Lord has explained such contact in the following words. Endeavors in devotional service are never baffled. nor is there failure. A slight beginning of such activities is sufficient even to deliver a person from the great ocean of material fears. As a highly potent drug injected intravenously acts at once on the whole body, the transcendental topics of the Lord injected through the ear of the pure devotee of the Lord can act very efficiently. Oral realization of the transcendental messages implies total realization, just as fructification of one part of a tree implies fructification of all other parts. This realization for a moment in the association of pure devotees like Shukadeva Goswami prepares one's complete life for eternity, and thus the sun fails to rob the pure devotee of his duration of life, inasmuch as he is constantly busy in the devotional service of the Lord, purifying his existence. Death is a symptom of the material infection of the living entity, of the living being. Only due to material infection is the living entity subjected to the law of birth, death, old age, and disease. The materialistic way of pious activities like charity is recommended in the Smriti Shastras, as quoted by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Money given in charity to a suitable person is guaranteed bank balance in the next life. Such charity is recommended to be given to a brahmana. If the money is given in charity to a non-brahmana, without brahminical qualification, the money is returned in the next life in the same proportion. If it is given in charity to a half-educated brahmana, even then the money is returned double. If the money is given in charity to a learned and fully qualified brahmana, the money is returned 100 and 1,000 times. And if the money is given to a Veda Paraga, one who has factually realized the path of the Vedas, it is returned by unlimited multiplication. The ultimate end of Vedic knowledge is realization of the personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, Vedaishcha sarver ahami vivedya. There is a guarantee of monies being returned if given in charity, regardless of the proportion. Similarly, a moment passed in the association of a pure devotee by hearing and chanting the transcendental messages of the Lord is a perfect guarantee for eternal life, for returning home back to Godhead. Madhama gatva punarjanma navidyate. In other words, a devotee of the Lord is guaranteed eternal life. A devotee's old age or disease in the present life is but an impetus to such guaranteed eternal life. Ayur harati vai pumsam udyan astan chayanasau tasyarte yachano nita utamashloka vartaya. Both by rising and setting, the sun decreases the duration of life of everyone, except one who utilizes the time by discussing topics of the all-good personality of Godhead. So if one thinks one will live forever, then there's not much impetus to cultivate devotional service. When we become aware of it, that at any moment I can fall off from this temporary platform I'm on, and I don't know where I'm going. And I have some sense that if I prepare myself, as Krishna speaks about in the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, that I can be ready for that time, then there's a sense of urgency. I like how this verse is reminding us that our time is limited here. During the Y2K scare, they had these little countdown timer clocks that would say when the end of the world was coming. You could buy them at novelty shops. You know, a lot of people actually thought it would happen. I wasn't even sure until that we were on Harinam and I kept looking, are the lights going to go out? Nothing happened. But there were a lot of theories. In any case, a year before, even a year and a half, they had these countdown clocks, countdown to Y2K. It was ticking down. And I thought of, what if I knew when my life was going to be over. So I did a little calculation. I looked in the actuary charts from the insurance companies. I filled out the forms to find out, you can do it online, what's your life expectancy? According to what the insurance companies say, and there's certain criteria that they use according to your age, your race, your habits. If you don't smoke, it saves you about 20 years. If you wear safety belts, it adds on another 10 years and so forth. There's a lot of things like that. When I came up with the number, the moment I wrote it down on the paper, I noticed a hesitation. Because I was thinking, no, actually I want to live forever. I don't want, this many years left. But what if I knew? And I also had a little countdown timer clock that was showing me how much time I actually had left. And then of course from that time, whatever it is, you say, if you calculated 33 years, and then you could start taking out the time that you waste. For instance, Prahlad Maharaj considers that sleeping is a waste of time. Of course, we have to sleep, but still, it's not entirely productive in the process of devotional service. And if you take that out, you take out other kinds of necessities to maintain the body, and you might come up with a really small number. That I don't have that much time actually at all. So best to have an efficient way in which to cultivate devotional service, especially hearing and chanting. So, one thing I was thinking about recently is to take discipline over distraction. We have two modes we can go into in our brain. We can be disciplined, or we can be distracted. Distraction seems like a shelter, because when I'm facing a lot of responsibilities that seem overwhelming, it's a place where I can supposedly take refuge, where I look at something that's not really relevant to my life, not even relevant to my life situation. And I just let my mind wander and be carried away by images and so forth. This can happen on television, it can happen in the internet, a lot of other places. However, there's no real happiness in that, and the Shastra doesn't recommend that. Shastra recommends being responsible for your own time. Realize that you've been given a great gift, the time that you have in the human form of life, and learn to apportion it properly. And this amounts to discipline. Actually, the word discipline comes from a Latin word which means learner. If we're attentive and we organize our time properly, then there's so much we can learn. And the ultimate thing to learn is about Krishna, to know the science of Krishna in truth. And if one does that, as Prabhupada mentions here, then one doesn't take birth again in this material world. That's an important goal to keep in mind, and an impetus to be disciplined. The material world is a precarious place, and I'll need a dictionary, I think. I'd like to look up the word precarious.
Look up the word what?
Precarious. Precarious. Depending on the will or pleasure of another. Dependent on uncertain premises. Dependent on chance, circumstances, unknown conditions. He earned a precarious livelihood by gambling. Origin Latin precarious, obtained by entreaty, uncertain, more at prayer. First used, known use 1646. Uncertain. It's uncertain in the material world. Anything can happen at any time. And So that's one thing to keep in mind. Bhagavatam reminds us, padam padam yam vipadam, that in any moment we can make a misstep, and that it can change our life. So one should be a little sober to remember that. That's helpful. And another way of being attentive to this verse is to prioritize. Find out by analyzing your life which things are the most important. Because it's easy enough to put aside the important things for things that are less important. Some things are very urgent and very important. Some things are not urgent and very important. Some things are urgent but not important, and some things are not urgent and not important. And oftentimes, when I'm not being attentive to organizing my time, I may take the not urgent, not important things, or I might take the urgent but not important things before I take the most urgent and most important things. And I've found that it's a very helpful exercise to take time at regular intervals to write down everything that I'm doing. And then decide which things are the most important. The other day I had written all this down last year in December. And the other day I met with Amit Prabhu, who's a top-rate manager, like a project manager. So he was asking me a lot of questions, and luckily I had all the information available because I had already written it down, all the different tasks that I'm doing in my life. And we started looking at them, and then also in the context of my service at ISV, I had written down all the different departments that are there. And we were looking at those, and he asked me, out of the, I don't know, there's about 20 different departments, he said, which would you say you would like to attend to in 2019 in the first quarter with the most giving the most priority? He said, pick 5. And he could see my face, like, pick 5, how can I do that? And he said, all right, 7 maximum. And then I really had to squeeze myself to look and say, okay, which ones are the top 7? And it was hard, because I want to attend to all of them. But prioritization helps one to look and see which things are the most important. That's obvious. But unless we do that, we won't know where to apportion our time properly. And one could do this in one's own life. And it's a remarkable exercise when you actually look and see the kinds of things that you're doing. You may not know all the duties that you have, and you may not even know where all your time's going. Often people don't have a financial plan either, and therefore they just spend money here and there, and they wonder why they're broke all the time. They don't have any idea where it's going. And so oftentimes financial planners, when they meet somebody like that, will say, okay, write down everything you spend, where you spend it. And then people become amazed. So this is one of the ways to be responsible with one's time, is to figure out, actually, it's time that's loaned to us, that's given by Krishna. And the more we respect it, the more we try to take care of it, the time we're given, the more we'll be able to take advantage of it, and the more Krishna will reciprocate with us. It's an old saying, don't major in minor things. There are a lot of minor things that we can get caught up in, our mind can get caught up in, even though they seem really, really important. If we go from a higher perspective, keep going a little higher, a little higher, a little higher, go high enough, and you'll see everybody thinks so many things in their life are important, or disasters, or the greatest victory that's ever happened. But when you take a high enough perspective, you see it's actually pretty insignificant. In fact, my life is insignificant except for the practices of devotional service that I invest in. Sometimes when I'm waiting for flights, I see people at the gate and they have their headphones in, their earplugs or earbuds, and they're on the phone. Somebody doing business, oftentimes, a business type person, man or woman, and they're pacing back and forth, near where everybody's waiting for the gate. And you can hear them like fully absorbed, I told Bob you should have sold that. Anyway, you should have listened to me. And okay, they're making plans. And I could see the expression on their faces. They look very concerned, very absorbed. And then I kind of look at the greater population and I see everybody's absorbed in some small context of their life, thinking, oh, this is so vital, so important. But if I look then a little further out into the outside world, I see, okay, well, there's a big world out there, and then I realize we're on a planet. It's spinning through space. And if you keep going further, the Earth is just a little speck of dust in a huge universe. And then I look back and I see the man with his brow furrowed on the phone, making a deal. How could you have done this or not done that? And of course, people have to make their livelihood, but still, it seems so insignificant then. And if I look at my life like that too, oftentimes the minor things that I think are so important that I'm majoring in, I'm giving so much of my time, trouble in, I'm become greatly anxious about them, losing sleep and so forth, that this is not the spirit of the Bhagavat life. Bhagavat life means to have the higher perspective. Remember, the sun's passing over. It's speaking to us. And think from the sun's perspective. Is it really important, that next little deal you make on the phone? Or whether you're attending to your devotional practice or not, is that important? So keep perspective of what's important. Don't major in minor things. Don't put all your energy in things that are going to come and go anyway. Narada Muni says, Tasyaya vaheto prayate takovido na labhyate yad brahmatam uparyada talabhyate dukkha varanyata sukham kalena sarvatra gabhira ramasa. When you get a body, it's the culmination of your previous karma, and therefore it's already locked in what you're going to get on the material side. Some people are going to work pulling on a rickshaw with bare feet in the street, and they're not going to go to MIT. If they do, it's some fluke, and there would be a movie about it, and everyone will think, oh, maybe I can be something. But if a hog's born, he's not going to go to MIT either, because he's got a certain kind of body. And Narada Muni says, according to our past karma, we're pretty much locked in, but it doesn't matter. That doesn't matter, he said. What matters is how we give our attention to the process of devotional service. That you can increase. The other part, no matter how you try to adjust it, it's still going to be frustrating. You'll still feel the limitation in trying to adjust your material situation. And I was talking to Goro yesterday. He was talking about traveling around in his van, going to these little villages, and how he'd just go in and start preaching, talking about Bhagavad Gita, and everyone would come alive, offer him a place to stay, give him money. And if you just, the more you give your life to just teaching Krishna consciousness and chanting Hare Krishna, see, Krishna takes care of you. Yogakshemam Bahamyaham. It's a really powerful revelation. So this is Narada saying that. It's in the Shastra. That don't major in minor things. Your karma is not such a major thing. But your spiritual life, that's major. Major in that. Major in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Get a PhD in the Bhagavatam. There's so many things you can study and become absorbed in, but what about Bhagavatam? Why not? One of the most important questions one can ask oneself throughout the day, moment to moment, is what's the best use of my time right now? That's a good question to ask, because questions have a hook on the end, a question mark, and it pulls your mind in a certain direction. So when you're finding yourself spacing out, you don't want to do it, but somehow or other the mind drags you away and you're spacing out. Hey, ask yourself, what's the best use of my time right now? And if you can just answer that question truthfully and think, here, the best thing I can do right now is this small thing that's actually more important than spacing out, and bring yourself to do it, then you'll feel a sudden connectedness that I'm following my intelligence, Buddhi Yoga. I'm chanting a chapter of Gita, finishing my rounds, reading my daily quota of pages, or doing some other kind of service, then you feel satisfied. So what's the question you could ask yourself throughout the day?
Best use of my time right now.
Yeah, say it one more time.
What's the best use of my time right now?
So that's homework for today. Ask yourself at least 3 times today, Vital Bhakta, what's the best use of my time right now? And then see what your intelligence answers, because the intelligence then won't come back and say, oh, it's looking at Netflix, or it's spacing out on Facebook. Your intelligence will say, oh, you should chant your chapter of Gita, you should finish your rounds, and so forth. So ask the question. It brings one's attention to the foreground, so you can actually take advantage of the human form of life. Another important principle is to invest in yourself. This verse actually recommends that. Invest in yourself. Make an investment. Because the human body, even in its most limited capacity, is extremely valuable. And even those who are not super intelligent or even very healthy or whatever, if they invest a little energy into devotional practice, the return is amazing. And Prabhupada mentions that in the purport here. He starts talking about how from the Smriti Shastras, if you give a donation to somebody, you get it back in your next life. In which case they'll call you Even Steven. Everyone's Even Steven in this world, because whatever you do, it comes back to you. And then it gives gradations, that if you give to somebody who's a brahmana, you get back twice as much. If you give to somebody who's a pure devotee, then you get back unlimited. And remember, in investing, what's the best ROI? What's the best return on your investment? In fact, there's a verse from the Padyavali that says, just as a miser counts his coins again and again, that's his favorite thing, is looking to see how much wealth he's got. And he goes back and he counts it. In fact, somebody told me that his grandfather, he was dying, he was having a heart attack, but he stopped at his the bank on the way to the hospital just to count his money before he went there. And he passed away in the parking lot of the bank. So it's a strong impetus to look and see, how much have I got? How much have I got? So the Padyavali said, just as a miser counts and then recounts his coins, you should also count and recount your mantras. And keep track. That's why we have counter beads. Make sure that you're making an investment. And don't forget that that's the best investment. Don't forget that there's nothing more valuable than the holy name, and how many times you're chanting and how many times you're listening to it. These other kinds of investments will slip through our fingers. That is, material investments, whatever money we have. So the person who has this focus will feel actual wealth, that I'm investing in myself. Another is to set up a drip system in your life. In gardening, if you have a garden, the best way to water it, or one of the best ways, is to set up an automatic drip system. So the way it's done is you lay out in your garden these little hoses that go all through the garden, and each one of the plants has its own little tiny hose that sits right near the plant and has a nozzle on the end. And then the main hose systems culminate at a valve that's bringing water, and right above that valve you put in an electronic box, and it has a timer on it. So just like right now back in California, we have a garden, and of course it's raining right now, so I turned it off before I left. But in the summertime when we're traveling, I know that it's being watered because I turned on the system and I made sure there was the right amount of water to each one of the plants, just on the box. And it took a while to set up, and it was also costly. But now the garden thrives all year long because it's got the right amount of water coming in. So we should also have a drip system in our lives. I mean, take time to figure out where you're giving your attention throughout the day, throughout the week, month, year. Are you investing in yourself? Are you giving yourself enough water to survive? Because plants on a hot day, they don't survive very long. And neither do we. Without the right amount of water, that means the right amount of devotional hearing and chanting, we succumb very easily to the influence of the material world when we don't get enough water. And therefore, it's important to figure that out. Am I getting enough? In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, see if I have the Madhya 25.279, Madhya 25.279. Is that easy for you, or should I look it up on my database? 25.279. 25.279. 25.279. Can I read you an excerpt? Is everyone still okay?
Yeah.
You're not feeling tortured or anyway? Okay. This is from the Madhya Lila, 25.279, as you probably know by now. And it's, oh, that's not the right verse. 25.279. 25.279. Well, that's not it either. Oh, here it is. It's actually 25.278. This verse says, it's from the chapter called How All the Residents of Varanasi Became Vaishnavas. The verse says, Ye lila amrit vine kai jari anapane tabi bhaktera durbal jivana chare kabindu pane Urpulita Tanumane Hasegai Kare Nartana. Men become strong and stout by eating sufficient grains, but the devotee who simply eats ordinary grains but does not taste the transcendental pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Krishna gradually becomes weak and falls down from the transcendental position. However, if one drinks but a drop of the nectar of Krishna's pastimes, his body and mind begin to bloom, and he begins to laugh, sing, and dance. Purport: all the devotees connected with the Krishna consciousness movement must read all the books that have been translated, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, and others. Otherwise, after some time, they will simply eat, sleep, and fall down from their position. Thus, they will miss the opportunity to attain an eternal blissful life of transcendental pleasure. So this is a metaphor about eating. I had a friend in school when I was in grammar school. I don't know if they call it that here, but grades kindergarten through
Call it elementary school.
6. Elementary school they call it there, yeah, elementary school. So grades kindergarten through 6, and I think I was in the 3rd or 4th grade. I had a friend named Ricky Masano, and we had a science class, I think in 3rd grade, Mr. Weber's class, and we had to do a science experiment. So Ricky was, he did this experiment. Well, let me just describe Ricky Masano. He was the skinniest kid in the class. He was really skinny, and didn't look very healthy or anything like that, because he didn't eat very well. So anyway, he did an experiment, because people were always telling him, Ricky, you got to eat better, otherwise you're going to stunt your growth. So Ricky got 2 white rats and kept them in cages at his house. And one of them he fed every day. He gave him water and white bread. Back then it was Wonder Bread. Builds strong bodies 9 ways, which was a total scam. It was processed, highly processed with gluten and all kinds of other stuff. Just white bread. And he fed one of the rats, that's what he fed him. And the other one, he gave him a really nice diet with, vegetables and raw vegetables, fruits, and whole grain bread. And it was so funny, we'd go over to see the 2 rats, and one of them looked like Ricky. It's like a skinny little rat with his eyes. Sorry, Ricky, if you're watching. I love you, but it's a fact. We both admitted it. He said, God, that looks like me. After a couple months, he had one little rat that was so skinny. And the other rat looked like Super Rat. He was like, wah, he was muscular and strong and ready to go. And so, actually he won the fair that year, because he brought in he showed the data from his experiment, and he showed what he fed. He had a controlled experiment that he did. And it was so demonstrative. Ricky started eating better after that. But in this verse from the Madhya Lila, Prabhupada's just pointing out a simple thing, that if your diet's poor, you're going to look like Ricky Masano and his little rat. And similarly, if you have a poor diet in spiritual life, what do you expect? Don't blame everybody else. David Byrne said, I don't know what you expect, staring into the TV set. You expect that you're going to, be a strong, healthy devotee if you don't hear and chant properly. It's not possible. So Prabhupada gives this prescription. He says every one of the devotees in the Krishna conscious movement should read all the books that have been published, including Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and so forth. Otherwise, life becomes non-productive. So, have a good diet, and make sure your spiritual diet. I'm writing an article now called Spiritual Fitness. Body, mind, and spirit. We have to take care of ourselves and have a regimen so that we're healthy spiritually. And that also includes taking care of our bodies as well. Prabhupada mentions that in the 8th canto in the section of Gajendra. He says you have to have central power and health in order to perform your devotional service. Prabhupada was diligent about his health regimen and so forth, and his hearing and chanting regimen. You can hear recordings of Prabhupada chanting chapters of Bhagavad Gita. He would relish it. And he'd also sit and do bhajans and hear and chant, obviously. Prabhupada knew so many verses. He spent years doing bhajan. He always doing bhajan. And this is where his appeal came from. If he went around and tried to spread a spiritual movement and he didn't have the level of bhajan that he had, who would have been interested? So this is how we can be really productive. Make sure that you have a good diet. People change their diets all the time, especially when they get sick. If you don't have, there's a sign I saw. It says, If you don't have time to take care of your health, then you'll be forced to take time in the times of illness. But oftentimes when people get ill, then they realize, oh, I should amend my diet. I should eat better. And we shouldn't wait until we feel ill spiritually and we have some difficulty. Well, we should take the advice of all the acharyas and of the Srimad Bhagavatam to make sure, find out how to get the best kind of spiritual diet. It will have its effect. And if you doubt it, just remember Ricky Masano and his rats. To that end, I advocate something very specific, and that is that everyone should have a schedule, a very clear schedule to know when they're going to finish Prabhupada's books. For instance, the Srimad Bhagavatam is a pretty long work. There's 18,000 verses. So how will you do that? Well, make a plan. And if you make a plan that I'm going to read the Bhagavatam, you'll be a different person. The moment you decide that, your life will be different. The way people see you will be different. The way you see others and the world will be different. Because you're majoring in a major thing. Reading Srimad Bhagavatam, making sure that you finish the Bhagavatam within a certain period of time. It doesn't matter what it is. But knowing that you're going to do it, don't let it languish. It's missing the best opportunity that we have to go back to Godhead in this one short, miserable life that we have. And why not take advantage of it as much as possible? I'll take a few reflections before I mention any of the final points.
Thanks for turning on so many light bulbs. One of the light bulbs that came on for me was you were talking about wasting time. And I remember one quote from Srila Prabhupada where he was about to go and take rest and he said, now I'm going to waste my time. Because he considered going to sleep to be a waste of time. At the same time, we know we need a certain amount of rest. But how much he must have been relishing Shastra, as you were saying, the process of hearing and chanting. Because when you're sleeping, you may not be doing so much hearing and chanting. Although Srila Prabhupada say that's why it's good to hear the Krishna book before you go to bed at night, because since the goal is to be 24/7 absorbed in hearing and chanting, then chances are if you hear the Krishna Lila pastimes, you may dream of them as well.
What to speak of chanting the whole Bhagavad Gita before you go to bed?
Wow.
Like we did last night.
Yeah.
Did any of you have that effect? Like, did you wake up in the middle of the night and you were kind of, that rhythm was going of the verses? It's there. Yeah. Go ahead, Gaurav.
Yeah, regarding Prabhup's absorption in bhajan, our god sister Omkara Devi Dasi, she was saying that she was working the reception at the New York temple, and all the devotees were out on Sankirtan. And she heard Prabhupada singing a bhajan, and he would chant. He was chanting Parama Karuna, how merciful Lord Chaitanya Gaura, and he would stop, and he'd start sobbing, crying. And then he started chanting again, chanting, singing. And then he'd stop again, and he'd be crying. And she felt very privileged. We just heard Prabhupada, because the door was open from Prabhupada's room, and she could hear his absorption, relishing, absorbed, thinking of how merciful Lord Chaitanya Gaura. So these bhajans are very valuable. Our Godbrother Dayananda Prabhu, who's really into preaching a lot about his point is that the greed, the main problem in the world today is greed. And which is causing all the environmental damage and all the problems. And he was saying the main way to counter greed is by sacrifice. And this we need to educate the masses and classes of people about his performance of some kirtan and he was saying, and therefore it's very essential to have transcendental entertainment in our communities, music. He was specifically, talking about kirtan, bhajan, but we know Prophet said the play, the drama of Rukmini Devi was even better than the book. So yes, these things should not be minimized. This is our life. This is our joy. This is our fun. To be absorbed in transcendental entertainment. So he was saying that needs to be at the core of all our Krishna conscious communities. I have some questions. They're not exactly related to the class, but if you want, I want to.
Okay. Let's do a couple more reflections and I'll take the questions.
There's one from online.
Online, yes. Oh, nice.
We are like Mr. Frog in each of our little ponds, totally oblivious to why we are here, the real purpose of our existence.
Yeah, it goes to perspective. Remember, what is our existential position? So as not to major in minor things. Other reflections?
Mother Priya. In the mind.
Yes. Take discipline over distraction. Time is on loan to us.
Time is on loan? Yeah.
To us from Krishna.
Yeah.
This is not the spirit of the Bhagavad Gita to lose sleep over small things. Ask yourself 3 times during the day, what is the best use of your time at this?
What's the best use of my time right now?
Right.
Yeah.
Invest in yourself. When you said, Pradya really said, count and recount your mantra, like daily
Yeah.
using.
Yeah.
What do you expect if you don't set up a healthy drip system to keep watering your spiritual life?
Yeah.
And Srila Prabhupada saying you have to have central power.
Say yes, right. Well, she covered them all, so yes, very well done, and thank you. Another online, and then.
From Bhakta Ankit,
Oh.
as a reflection.
Yes.
We need to make our intelligence strong. A weaker intelligence is at the mercy of the mind. Reading spiritual literature, absorbing in the teachings, reflecting and applying the knowledge gradually makes the muscle of intelligence stronger, fit for progressing in spiritual life.
Yes, it's a really nice point. Prabhu?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Distraction seems very easy or very natural. Is it because of the default setting?
Yeah, it's kind of it's one of the symptoms of ignorance. Ignorance, which is also described as tamas, one of the lower energies of the universe, can also be pronounced ignorance. That I'm ignoring what's true. And it's irrational. The mode of ignorance is irrational. That I ignore myself. If I ignore God, then I have to ignore myself because I'm actually part of God. And I suffer because of that. And I get into a position where I'm trying to avoid the reality that I'm a person and I'm related to the Supreme Person. The word avoid always reminds me of how there are many philosophies that actually put forward this idea that ultimately we're all void. What does avoidance mean? It means you're avoiding, you're making impersonal yourself. So distraction, when one's affected by the lower modes of nature and absorbed in ignorance, is natural. This is mentioned in the Bhagavatam, Payam Dvitiya Binibeshata Syad Ishad Apetasya Viparyo Smriti. That's this Abhinibeshata means absorption in that which is not real. And this is the cause of fear and anxiety, it says. That's where fear and anxiety arise. So then the Shastra says, okay, how to solve that? Turn your attention back to reality. Because reality is beautiful. Reality is the most beautiful thing. And when I see it, as Prabhupada mentioned here, even for a second, in the association of sadhus who are hearing and chanting, then my life will be changed. Because that's my natural setting. So yes, it is a kind of default mode. Once you turn your attention away from reality, which is Krishna, then you become absorbed in all kinds of distraction. Krishna says it in the Gita, Vyavasayatmaka buddhireke hakurunandana bahu shakahyanantascha buddhayo vyavasayina. If you don't have your attention fixed in yoga on Krishna, then it will be many-branched. It's unlimited how many branches. He says, Bahu Shaka hi anantas. There's unlimited ways that it can go in the material world, in combinations and permutations. So yes. And think about also distraction. The word Krishna means attractor. That which attracts our attention. So there's attraction and there's distraction, which is the opposite of attraction. And so when we're not attracted to Krishna, we'll be distracted by the default mode into that which is not satisfying to us. No, Haridev, you had a point?
Taking time to write down how we spend our time, I think that was very, very profound to really try to apply and prioritize.
Yes.
And especially like what you said is they're most important and most urgent.
Yeah.
And the four combinations, and if you take your time and write down, and then you can see how you're spending time. And
Yeah.
really, I think a good exercise to apply.
Yes, and one thing I've personally realized is if you want to grow in your life, then find out what the most important things you have to do in a day are. And oftentimes they're the most difficult or the most challenging. Not necessarily as in heavy lifting or something, but mentally there's things I don't want to do. I'm avoiding them. I'm procrastinating because I dread doing them. But turn off your brain for a minute and just do it. And if you do the most challenging things first, and you realize, hey, I've already done the worst of it. I did it. Then the rest of the things become child's play, and you'll find yourself, full of energy. Also, in the way of hearing and chanting, it's really important to build into your day the fundamentals of your practice. And in a temple, it's a lot easier. You see the devotees, they come to Mangalarti, then they sit and chant, they do the Jholsi Puja and things like that. And when you're out working, you're traveling, whatever you're doing, find out what are those most fundamental of practices that you have to do in order to feel whole, and get those done first. Those, and then all the things that you're dreading doing, and do those first, and then you become supercharged. And just a couple points about the first point you made about looking and seeing which are the most important things. There's personal strategic planning. For instance, corporations, they're all based on strategic plans. They go to great lengths to decide what they're going to do. They have key result areas. They have very specific goals. They have action items that they're working on. Otherwise, you couldn't keep together a big corporation like Apple. And they have so many departments, and they're all running really well. And the people have to be organized. They have to be working from a list and very clear about which way they're going. So one can also do this personally. You can have a personal strategic plan. And a good time to do it is the beginning of the year. Make your plan, your strategic plan, so that you know what are the next steps, what am I going to do. And also, take continuous learning as your motto. Don't think, oh, I already read it, I already know it. Any one verse in the Bhagavad Gita, you could get a PhD in. You could write a thesis paper on any one verse. And you could go deeper into any of the devotional topics. And like Krishna Kshetra Maharaj, once I went and visited him in Vrindavan when he was writing his thesis paper for his PhD on Archana. I just sat with him for hours and talked about Archana, and he had the luxury of sitting there for a couple of years and just studying what is deity worship. Is that interesting? Absolutely. And who's to stop you if you want to go more deeply within the process of devotional service? Otherwise, you can go for 20, 30 years and you're singing prayers you don't even know what they mean. You don't even know how they're pronounced. Yasya prasada bhagavat prasadam room. And like, what are you doing? I don't know, but everyone else is doing it. And the other thing is, to remember that I got this quote years ago and I really like it. The unavoidable truth is that no one really cares as much as you do about your own progress in life. So if you don't care, you're in real trouble. You should care about whether you're making advancement or not. I mean, ultimately Prabhupada says you have to fly your own plane. And you can get training. He says as the Acharya can help you, but you have to take advantage of it. So you really have to decide that this is really up to me. And the exciting thing about being a human being is at any time you can decide that and you can change your life. You can go in the direction that you want to go. It may be by increments, but if you don't have the goal, if you haven't planned out what's the most important thing, then you can major in minor things throughout your life and end up really feeling unsatisfied. Even as a devotee, you can get to the end of this life and think, why didn't I take advantage of the process when I had it right in front of me? And what a sad thing that is. Of course, any devotional service is glorious and beneficial. But the Shastra urges us, including this verse today, that don't take it for granted and don't think it's good enough. Develop a sense of urgency and really push for it. And use everything at your disposal to develop it. And don't think just because you're in an institution, just because you're an initiator, just because anything, that you don't have to try. And try to apply yourself. We have to end, so Gaurav, probably we can sit and talk and I'll answer. I mean, who might answer your questions, but whatever question you have, we can discuss it. So we're leaving today. We're going to the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area, to be with the devotees there who are working hard for the Krishna consciousness movement and specifically for the marathon right now. And so we're deeply grateful for your association. This is our home away from home. I can't think of happier moments in my life than being in kirtan here in front of the deities and being with all of you, and especially with Dharmaprana and Gora when they get together and have kirtan. I just go to another planet. I feel so happy, like I don't care what happens in my life as long as I can have that. And all of you are so dedicated. See you here year after year, keeping this beautiful community alive. Every community has its particular focus. And here there's so many good things going on in the way of taking care of devotees when they come, and devotee care, and transcendental book distribution. Deity worship is so steady. Distributing so much prasadam. I mean, if you started listing it, you'd see the many, many departments. And it's easy to get caught up in the things that are going wrong and then become discouraged or bitter. But don't do that. You can take a modicum of that, but for the most part, remember how valuable it is that you're keeping this place open. Last night when we were chanting the Gita and I saw people come in to see the deities, I was thinking, wow, it's so nice to have this for people to come in and see Krishna. And especially because it's coming through parampara, the whole presentation. Krishna's actually here. And where else can they go for shelter in Toronto? Definitely not Hudson's or any of those other big malls. I mean, that's the worst torture you can have, is get locked in one of those malls, find a parking space, go in there and walk around and look for stuff for Uncle Louie, you know, and I mean, this is a real distraction for the soul, and it's very difficult. So you're doing the best service, and please take care of each other, and do your utmost to spread Krishna consciousness all over Toronto, because it's one of the nicest cities in the world. And definitely the Canadians are the nicest people in the world. There's no doubt about that. Hey? Hey, I'm half Canadian. My mom's from Saskatoon.
It's
A.
Not hey.
I didn't say hey, I said A.
Oh,
Didn't say.
I didn't see? She was close. She said, I didn't say hey. I said A. I'm half Canadian. I know how to say A. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Gaur Premanande, Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo, Nitai Gaura Haribo, Bo, Haribo, Nitai Gaura Haribo. Vanchakoptrubhishcha kripasnaveva patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha nantakodi vaishnavi ki jai.
Armarman, Natari Armarman, Natari Armarman, Natari Armarman, hey, Natari Armarman, Natari Armarman, Natari Armarman, Natari Armarman.